Introduction. Robert Falcon Scott was out of time, out of food, and nearly out of hope. It was March 1912, and he was stuck in a tiny tent in the middle of the coldest place on Earth. Outside, the wind howled across the Antarctic ice, a white wall of noise that never stopped. Just 11 miles away sat a massive pile of food and fuel. If he could just reach that depot, he and his men would live. But they couldn't move. They were frozen in place, paralyzed by the very environment they had tried to conquer. While Scott was shivering in the dark, another man was already sailing home in glory. Roald Amundsen had reached the South Pole weeks earlier. He didn't just win the race, he made it look almost easy. Amundsen didn't rely on grit or toughing it out. He didn't wait for a crisis to decide what to do next. He had spent years studying every tiny detail of how to survive in the cold. He used dogs because they were proven to work. He wore fur clothes, like the people who actually lived in the Arctic. He built a system that worked even when things went wrong. Scott, on the other hand, tried everything at once. He brought motor sledges that broke down in the cold. He brought ponies that sank into the snow. He relied on his own willpower to push through when his plans fell apart. He thought that if he just wanted it enough, he could force his way to the finish line. But the Antarctic doesn't care how much you want something. It only cares if your system works. The secret war in your head. You might not be stuck in a tent in Antarctica, but if you are reading this, you probably know exactly how Robert Falcon Scott felt. You know what it's like to be 11 miles from the depot. You can see the goal. You know what you need to do. You might even have a list of the steps right in front of you. But for some reason your brain won't let you move. You are frozen in wait mode, staring at a screen or a pile of laundry, feeling the clock tick toward a deadline you know you're going to miss. This feeling isn't about being lazy. It isn't about not caring. In fact, most people with ADHD care too much. That's where the buzz comes from, that vibrating anxiety in your chest that shows up when you have 50 things to do and no idea how to start the first one. It feels like having 50 browser tabs open in your brain at the same time, and somewhere in one of those tabs, music is playing but you can't find where it's coming from. When you live like this, life feels like a constant series of fires you have to put out. You are a reactive firefighter. You wait until the smoke is thick, and the flames are licking the ceiling before you can finally find the focus to move. The panic of the deadline becomes the only thing that gives you the fuel to work. But that fuel is expensive. It leaves you feeling burned out, shaky, and full of shame. You wonder why you can't just be normal. You wonder why the easiest tasks, the ones that take 5 minutes, feel like climbing a mountain made of glass. Meet Leo Vance. At 2 a.m. in a quiet house in Seattle, Leo Vance was living in that glass mountain. Leo is 34 years old. He is a senior graphic designer at a big, fast-paced agency. On paper, he looks like a success. He is quick-witted, kind, and when he is on, he is the most creative person in the room. He has a wife named Sarah, who is a nurse, and a 3-year-old daughter named Maya, who is the light of his life. But right now, Leo felt like a fraud. He was sitting in his home office, which he calls the cave. The desk was covered in half-empty coffee mugs, crumpled papers, and 3 different notebooks he had bought, because he thought this one would finally be the one to keep him organized. He was staring at a blank screen. A presentation for a huge client was due in 8 hours. He'd had 2 weeks to work on it, but he had spent those 2 weeks getting ready to work. He had cleaned the office. He had researched new fonts. He had fallen down a 3-hour rabbit hole on Wikipedia, learning about the history of the stapler. As the cursor blinked on the screen, Leo reached for a pen and accidentally knocked a folder off his desk. A yellowed piece of paper slid out. It was a to-do list from 3 years ago. As he read it, his heart sank. Call the bank. Finish the portfolio. Stop wasting time. It was the same list. Different year, same struggle. Leo realized that he hadn't actually changed. He was still the same guy, making the same mistakes, feeling the same heavy shame. He felt like a secondary character in his own life, watching everyone else move forward while he stayed stuck in the mud. He told himself the same thing he said every night. Tomorrow, I'll just have more willpower. Tomorrow, I'll try harder. The willpower lie. The biggest lie we are told about productivity is that it's about willpower. We are told that if we just disciplined ourselves, we would be successful. But for an ADHD brain, relying on willpower is like trying to run a marathon on a broken leg. You can try as hard as you want, but the bone is still broken. Executive function is the engine room of the brain. It's the part of your mind that helps you plan, stay focused, remember instructions, and manage multiple tasks. In a typical brain, this engine runs smoothly in the background. In an ADHD brain, the engine is powerful. It's like a Ferrari engine, but the brakes are weak and the steering wheel sometimes locks up. When your executive functions aren't working, you experience the gap. This is the distance between knowing what to do and actually doing it. You aren't broken and you aren't lazy. You are simply working with a brain that has a different kind of wiring. You are trying to use an internal system that wasn't built for the modern world of endless distractions and constant pings. From firefighter to architect. This book is about closing that gap. It is about moving from being a reactive firefighter to becoming an intentional architect. An architect doesn't just show up at a construction site and start hammering nails. They have a blueprint. They have tools. They have a system that ensures the building stands up even if the weather is bad. Mastery of your ADHD isn't about changing who you are. It's not about fixing your brain so it acts like everyone else's. It's about building external systems that do the heavy lifting for you. By the end of this book, you will be able to stop the procrastination cycle, learn why your brain waits for the panic hit, and how to start tasks without needing a crisis. Clear the mental noise. Use the external brain to stop trying to remember everything and start actually doing things. Manage your energy, not just your time. Understand your dopamine budget so you don't end the day feeling like a squeezed-out sponge. Kill the shame. Replace the "I'm lazy" narrative with a clear understanding of your neurochemistry. Build boring consistency. Create systems that work even on your worst days when your motivation is zero. We are going to use real science and real stories. We aren't just going to look at modern research. We are going to look at some of the greatest minds in history who likely struggled with these exact same issues. Our guides on the journey. You are in good company. Some of the most brilliant people to ever live had noisy brains. We will follow their stories to see how they managed to change the world despite, and sometimes because of, their distractions. Leonardo da Vinci, the ultimate divergent thinker. He was a genius who struggled to finish almost anything. We will look at how he used notebooks to manage his wandering mind. Thomas Edison, a man who realized he couldn't hold all his ideas in his head, so he built a factory to act as his external executive function. Simone Biles, the greatest gymnast of all time. We will learn from her about what happens when your brain glitches under pressure, and how to use emotional regulation to get back on track. You will also follow Leo Vance. We will watch as Leo stops trying to force himself to be better, and starts building a life that actually fits his brain. You will see him move from that 2 a.m. panic in the cave, to a place of reliability, trust, and most importantly, peace. The roadmap ahead. We are going to break this journey down into manageable steps. We will start by looking at why the easiest tasks feel so hard, and how your brain's command center actually works. We will learn how to design an external brain, so you never have to worry about forgetting a brilliant idea again. We will explore the friction map, the invisible things that make you stop before you even start. We will look at the urgency trap, and why your brain loves a crisis. We will even tackle the wall of awful, the emotional baggage that makes a pile of mail feel like a physical threat. Along the way, you'll find practical tools like the 2-minute rule for getting past activation energy, time mapping to fix time blindness, the Eisenhower matrix to help you choose the lead domino when everything feels important, The 20-mile march to prevent the sprint and crash cycle that leads to burnout. A new beginning. If you have spent your life feeling like you are falling short of your potential, I want you to take a deep breath. The potential everyone keeps talking about is still there. It hasn't gone anywhere. You just haven't had the right manual for the engine. You don't need more grit. You don't need a more expensive planner. And you definitely don't need more shame. What you need is a system that bridges the gap between your intentions and your actions. You need to stop being the explorer who tries to tough it out like Scott, and start being the architect who prepares like Amundsen. The ice is cold, the wind is loud, and the depot feels far away. But you aren't stuck anymore. You are about to build a way forward. The path from reactive firefighter to intentional architect starts with a single step. It starts with understanding that your brain is not broken, it's just waiting for a better system. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Why does the easiest task feel impossible? The air in the room feels thick, like you are trying to move through a pool of warm honey. Your heart is doing a strange, fluttering dance against your ribs. It is not exactly a panic attack, but it is a cousin to one. You know exactly what you need to do. The task is sitting right there in front of you. It might be an email that needs a 3-sentence reply. It might be a bill that requires you to log into a website and click a single button. It might even be something you actually enjoy, like starting a new sketch or calling a friend. But your body will not move. There is a physical wall between your brain and your hands. You tell your legs to stand up, but they feel like they belong to someone else. You tell your brain to focus, but it feels like a radio stuck between stations, filled with static and white noise. This is not laziness. Laziness is a choice. This is a quiet internal war where your intentions are screaming one thing and your nervous system is doing another. The shame starts to leak in around the edges. You think, why am I like this? Why can a child do this task while I, a grown adult, am paralyzed by it? This feeling has a name. It is the intention-action gap. It is the space where your plans go to die. It is the reason the easiest tasks often feel like climbing a mountain without shoes. The genius who could not finish. In the year 1483, a man sat in a dusty studio in Milan, Italy. He was 31 years old, tall, handsome, and widely considered the most brilliant person in the city. His name was Leonardo da Vinci. He had just been given the chance of a lifetime. A group of church officials, known as the Confraternity of the Immaculate Conception, wanted him to paint a massive centerpiece for their chapel. They called it the Virgin of the Rocks. Leonardo was a man who saw the world in high definition. While other people saw a tree, Leonardo saw the way the light hit the individual leaves, the way the sap moved through the trunk, and the way the wind created patterns in the branches. He had 1,000,000 ideas a minute. He was a master of anatomy, engineering, music, and math. But he had a secret that tormented him. He could almost never finish what he started. The church officials gave Leonardo a deadline. They gave him money up front. They gave him a clear list of what they wanted. For most painters of the time, this was a simple job. You set up the wood panel, you sketch the figures, and you paint. But for Leonardo, the easy task of painting a religious scene was impossible because his brain would not stop wandering. Instead of painting the Virgin Mary's face, Leonardo became obsessed with the rocks in the background. He spent weeks studying the geology of caves. He spent months researching how light reflects off water. He would go to the studio, pick up a brush, and then spend 6 hours staring at a shadow on the wall, trying to understand the physics of it. To the church officials, he looked like he was doing nothing. They sent him angry letters. They threatened to sue him. They called him unreliable. Leonardo was not lazy. His journals from this time are filled with thousands of pages of incredibly hard work. He was working more than anyone else in Milan, but he was not working on the one thing he was supposed to be doing. He was stuck in a cycle of productive procrastination. He would do anything, study the flight of birds, design a flying machine, or dissect a frog, as long as it wasn't the painting he had promised to finish. The easy task of finishing the painting felt like a heavy weight he could not lift. He eventually finished a version of the painting, but it took him 25 years. He spent nearly 3 decades being chased by lawyers and angry priests because he could not bridge the gap between his brilliant intentions and the simple act of finishing a project. Even the greatest genius in history felt the sting of the wall of awful that stands between an ADHD brain and a finished task. The weight of an envelope. 500 years later, in a small kitchen in Seattle, Leo Vance is feeling the exact same weight. Leo is 34. He is a senior graphic designer, which means he gets paid to be creative and fast. At work, when there is a crisis, Leo is a hero. If a client needs a logo in 2 hours, Leo's brain catches fire in the best way possible. He enters a flow state where the rest of the world disappears. He forgets to eat. He forgets to pee. He just creates. But right now, it is 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. The house is quiet. His wife, Sarah, is at the hospital working a night shift. His daughter, Maya, is finally asleep. Leo is standing at the kitchen counter, staring at a single white envelope from the IRS. He knows what it is. It is a notice about a small mistake on his taxes from 2 years ago. He doesn't owe a lot of money, and he knows exactly how to fix it. All he has to do is open the envelope, read the code, and type it into a website. It would take 5 minutes. Leo reaches for the envelope. His hand stops 2 inches away. Suddenly, he feels a desperate need to check the weather. Then, he notices a small smudge on the kitchen window. He finds a paper towel and starts scrubbing the window. While he is scrubbing, he remembers that he forgot to buy more paper towels, so he opens his phone to add them to a grocery list. Once the phone is open, he sees a notification for a news story about a new space telescope. 30 minutes later, Leo is sitting on the floor of the kitchen, reading about deep space photography. The window is half clean. The envelope is still sitting on the counter, unopened. Leo feels a wave of heat wash over his chest. It is the shame spiral. He thinks about Sarah. She works 12-hour shifts saving lives, and he can't even open a piece of mail. He feels broken. He feels like a failure. To an outsider, Leo looks like he is just being lazy or avoidant. But inside Leo's brain, that envelope has become a monster. It is no longer just a piece of paper. It is a symbol of all the things he has forgotten, all the deadlines he has missed, and all the ways he feels he is letting his family down. The easier the task is, the more it hurts that he can't do it. If it were a giant, complex design project, he would be fine. But because it is just a letter, the fact that he can't open it feels like proof that something is fundamentally wrong with him. The science of the engine room. To understand why Leonardo da Vinci and Leo Vance struggle with easy tasks, we have to look at the engine room of the brain. Most people think that doing a task is a matter of willpower. They think of willpower like a muscle. If you just push harder, you can do the thing. But for someone with ADHD, the problem isn't the muscle. The problem is the ignition system. In a typical brain, the prefrontal cortex acts like a CEO or an air traffic controller. Its job is to look at all the incoming information, pick the most important task, and send a signal to the rest of the brain to go. When a typical brain sees a bill that needs to be paid, the CEO says, "This is important. If we don't do this, there will be a fine. Do it now." The brain then releases a small hit of a chemical called dopamine. This dopamine acts like fuel. It creates a little bit of spark that makes the person feel a tiny bit of pleasure or relief when they start the task. In an ADHD brain, the engine room works differently. The CEO is often on vacation, or perhaps they are distracted by a bright butterfly outside the window. More importantly, the fuel lines are leaky. This is what we call dopamine debt. Dopamine is the chemical of pursuit and reward. It is what makes us want to do things. The ADHD brain is naturally low on dopamine. Because of this, it is always looking for a high-interest task, something exciting, scary, new, or physically stimulating. These things provide a big splash of dopamine that allows the brain to turn on. This is why Leo Vance can work for 10 hours straight on a high-stakes design project. The urgency of the deadline and the novelty of the creative challenge provide the dopamine his brain needs to function. He doesn't need willpower because he has a flood of chemical fuel. But a tax envelope? A tax envelope is low interest. It is boring. It is static. It offers zero dopamine. In fact, because it is associated with a mistake, it actually feels like it will drain dopamine. When Leo's brain looks at the envelope, it doesn't see a 5-minute task. It sees a dopamine void. His brain literally cannot find the spark to turn the engine over. This leads to the intention-action gap. Leo intends to open the mail. His values tell him he should open the mail. He knows the consequences of not opening the mail. But because the spark isn't there, the physical action never happens. Dr. Russell Barkley, one of the world's leading experts on ADHD, says that ADHD is not a disorder of knowing. People with ADHD usually know exactly what they should be doing. They are often very smart and have great plans. Instead, ADHD is a disorder of doing. It is a breakdown at the point of performance. It is like having a car with a powerful V8 engine, but a broken wire between the key and the starter. You can turn the key all you want, but the engine won't roar to life. The wait mode trap. Another reason the easiest tasks feel impossible is a phenomenon called wait mode. Imagine you have a doctor's appointment at 2 p.m. It is currently 10 a.m. For most people, those 4 hours are a great time to get work done, go for a run, or clean the house. They can track the time and stop when it is time to leave. But for the ADHD brain, time is not a steady river. It is more like a fog. This is called time blindness. Because the ADHD brain cannot accurately feel the passage of time, it treats an upcoming event like a giant looming wall. If Leo Vance has a meeting at 2 p.m., his brain enters wait mode at 10 a.m. He feels like he can't start any real tasks because he might get lost in them and miss the appointment. He also feels like he can't do small tasks because his brain is using all its energy just to remember that the 2 p.m. appointment exists. He sits on the couch, scrolling through his phone, feeling miserable. He wants to be productive, but he is paralyzed. He is waiting for the appointment. This is an executive function failure. His brain cannot gate his attention correctly. It treats the 2 p.m. meeting as if it is happening right now, which makes everything else feel impossible. By the time the appointment actually happens, Leo is exhausted. He has spent 4 hours doing nothing, yet he feels like he just ran a marathon. This is the exhaustion of the internal firefighter. He is constantly trying to manage the fires of his own thoughts, leaving him with no energy for the simple tasks of daily life. Forgiving the genius within. If we look back at Leonardo da Vinci, we see that he eventually found ways to work with his brain, even if he didn't have a name for it. He started using a technique that we now call lowering the barrier to entry. When Leonardo struggled to start a massive painting, he wouldn't try to paint the whole thing at once. Instead, he would make hundreds of tiny, messy sketches in his notebooks. These sketches were low stakes. They didn't have to be perfect. They were just for him. By making the task smaller and less scary, he was able to trick his brain into starting. He also used body doubling, though he didn't call it that. He surrounded himself with students and assistants in his studio. Having other people around who were also working made it easier for him to stay in work mode. The presence of others acted like an external anchor for his wandering mind. The most important thing Leonardo did, however, was eventually forgive himself. He wrote in his journals about his frustrations, but he never stopped trying. He realized that his distractions, his obsession with rocks, water, and birds, were actually what made him a genius. If he had been a normal painter who just finished his work on time, he would have been forgotten. It was his divergent, wandering, hyper-focused brain that allowed him to see things no one else could see. The first step out of the fog. Back in the kitchen in Seattle, Leo Vance takes a deep breath. He remembers something he read about ADHD. He remembers that his brain is not broken, it just has a different operating system. He decides to stop trying to force himself to open the envelope with willpower. Instead, he tries to change the dopamine math. He lowers the stakes. He tells himself, I don't have to fix the tax problem tonight. I just have to touch the envelope. He adds stimulation. He puts on his favorite upbeat music. The music provides a small, steady stream of dopamine that greases the wheels of his brain. He uses a physical trigger. He grabs a letter opener, a cool, heavy brass one he bought at an antique store. The physical click of the tool makes the task feel more like an activity and less like a chore. Leo walks over to the counter. The music is playing. He picks up the brass letter opener. He feels the weight of it in his hand. He slides it under the flap of the envelope and rips it open. That's it. The monster is gone. Inside is a simple form that says he owes $42. He takes a picture of it with his phone and uploads it to his tax software. The whole process takes exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds. As he finishes, Leo feels a massive surge of relief. The honey in the air has cleared. He isn't a failure. He isn't lazy. He just needed a different way to start the engine. The timeless struggle. Leonardo da Vinci died in 1519. On his deathbed, it is said that he apologized to God and man for leaving so much work unfinished. He died thinking he had failed because he struggled with the easy task of finishing what he started. But today, we don't look at Leonardo's unfinished works as failures. We look at them as masterpieces of a unique mind. We see that his struggle was not a lack of character, but a byproduct of a brain that was built for discovery rather than rote production. When you find yourself staring at a sink full of dishes, a blank computer screen, or an unopened envelope, you are standing in the same shadow that Leonardo did. You are experiencing a glitch in the engine room, not a flaw in your soul. The easy task feels impossible because your brain is designed for the extraordinary task, and it hasn't learned how to handle the ordinary ones yet. The intention-action gap is real, and it is painful. But it is not a prison sentence. By understanding the dopamine debt and the way your internal CEO works, you can start to build bridges over that gap. You can stop yelling at your engine to start and begin learning how to fix the wiring. You are not a reactive firefighter because you want to be. You are a firefighter because you haven't been given the blueprints to be an intentional architect yet. But the blueprints exist. And as Leonardo eventually learned, even if it takes 25 years to finish a masterpiece, the beauty of the final work is what remains, long after the shame of the struggle has faded away. Chapter 2: The Executive Engine, Understanding Your Brain's Command Center. Mr. Henderson was the kind of man who smelled like old coffee and sawdust. He ran the small engine repair shop at the end of my street when I was 10 years old. One afternoon, I brought him a lawnmower that refused to start. I had spent 3 hours pulling the cord until my arm felt like jelly. I was angry, frustrated, and ready to kick the machine into the creek. I told him the mower was lazy and broken. He didn't say a word. He just leaned over, unscrewed a small metal cap, and pointed a greasy finger at a tiny plastic piece. It was a fuel filter, clogged with a single pinch of dirt. He cleaned it out, put it back, and gave the cord one gentle pull. The engine roared to life instantly. He looked at me and said something I never forgot. He told me that most people think an engine stops working because it's bad or weak. But usually, the engine is perfectly strong. It just has a timing problem or a clogged line. The power is there, but the command center can't tell the power where to go. That is the exact same struggle people face when their brain feels like it's fighting them every single day. We spend our lives pulling the cord, getting exhausted, and calling ourselves lazy. We think we just need more willpower. But the truth is much simpler and much more hopeful. Your brain isn't weak.